Welcome to Cause Before Symptom, uncovering the real cabal and spiritual forces that are controlling the world. And now, here is your host, James Carner.
Welcome to Cause Before Symptom. I'm your host, James Carner. Today is December 10th, 2025, and tonight's episode is all about the Satanists. Yeah. The Satanists and why they use the humiliation rituals to rule the modern world. They have to put people in front and humiliate the crap out of them. And that's their kind of funny way of just saying, hey, we're in control, you're not. And we're going to go through this whole thing and go through all the esoteric bullshit about it. But I thought it'd be important for you guys to understand when a Hollywood actor or a politician gets busted for something like pedophilia or drugs or something, these people are protected. But they must go through a humiliation ritual to show that they're part of the jester, the joke of the whole system. And the joke's on you because they're being controlled. And most of the time, probably 90% of the time, the person that gets in trouble is going through a humiliation ritual. Welcome, guys. It's so good to have you here. Let's do a shout out to everybody on the live chat Rumble. Number one warrior, we've got Scorpion saying, hey, warrior family. Pastor, are you familiar with the infancy gospel of Thomas? I watched the movie The Carpenter's Son, which plays off darker themes of Jesus's teaching or teenage years. Found it interesting. Well, I don't know anything other than the years that Jesus was a teenager. He was in his 20s. He had to study every single word because he had to follow 613 laws. God gave the Jews 10 commandments, and the Jews added 603 to it. So anything that's outside of the now Ethiopian traditional Tewahedo Orthodox 5th, 6th century scrolls, I can't take it serious. And the reason being is because they kept the originals and they gave us the originals in the 60s on purpose so that the world could see. Nobody knew. And we took that 1960s document and I translated it from Ge'ez to English. This is what I'm going to go through. And if anybody makes a movie about Jesus, it's going to be absolutely Hollywood and isn't going to be accurate. Like if a lot of people ask me, what do you think of the Passion of the Christ? I think that they were inaccurate in a lot of things. They missed all kinds of great points that really shouldn't have been missed, meaning the whole reason why Jesus died, to pay the ransom. They didn't even mention that. And in the Passion, it didn't even show that Jesus, when he died, he went to take the keys of death and hell. You see, Hollywood and anything out there that gives half-truths, they're not going to give you the real stuff. They're going to, and like we're going to talk about tomorrow night, they're going to take control of the opposition. And they're going to frame it so that it's got enough truth for you to listen, but not give you the actual real story behind it. And that's sad. In fact, tomorrow night, we're going to be we're going into a deep dive of Candace Owens. Because I know a lot of you guys listen to her and think that she's, string beans. And the real reality is she works for the Orsini clan. She married into the British aristocracy. And you have to do some research to find out where she really lies. And tomorrow we're going to be uncovering her just like we would uncover the infancy gospel of Thomas. We got to get to the heart of the matter. Heart of the matter is always hidden on purpose. And that's why I did this show, because I haven't found anybody that can broadcast information like I do. Everyone's letting me down. Nobody's going to the actual real cause. So I had to do it. So I'm hoping that there's going to be more people that pick up what I did and get to the cause and the heart of the matter. Instead of just playing around and fluffing around with all of the bullshit, because we'll never, ever get to know who the real enemy is. And on top of that, we should understand that if we protest in front of the dynasty homes, in front of all of their buildings, if we protest in front of them, if we dropped manure off at that doorstep instead of Parliament or the White House or a Capitol in your state, you would do a hell of a lot more better of a job changing the world and getting them to do what you want them to do, because they are hidden on purpose. And that's why I'm trying to expose them. Number 2, Warriors, Claire saying, good evening. What's up, Claire? Thanks for being here. Number 3, Warriors, Boots After saying, hello, Pastor James of the Rumble Airwaves and creator of Elite Potion. Hello, fellow Warriors. Hope everyone is feeling blessed, and welcome in new listeners. If you're enjoying the topic, please hit the thumbs up button. Yes, thank you. Hit the thumbs up button. God bless you. Thank you. That's the only way we actually get any traction on Rumble. It's funny, we only have a couple thousand people who watch this show and only a handful live, but that's how it is. When you preach the truth, when you get to the cause and you don't talk about the symptoms, they're going to censor you, and I've been highly censored. You guys know this. Number 4, Warrior is Surfer Wife saying, hello, family. Cannot believe Christmas is 2 weeks away. Wow, I know. Isn't that trippy? Number 5, Warrior is Robert Gertison saying, hello from Cancun, Mexico. I am jealous. Robert, enjoy yourself down there. Just enjoy Cancun. I love Cancun. I even rented a car and drove to Chichen Itza again. Second time being there, looking at all of the old temples and the history behind the craziness that it was back then. Beautiful area, Cancun. I've even spent time in Cozumel, little island outside of Cancun. And yeah, awesome, man. I'm so happy for you, Robert. Just chill and be happy. Number 6, Warrior Scorpion saying, like Nick Fuentes on Pierce Morgan. Yeah, the guy is just paid opposition. That's all he is. And number 7, Warriors Boofob saying, g'day, mate. All the way from Melbourne, Australia. Hey, welcome. Good to have you here. And I always make fun of Boofob saying, why is it that Australians always speak with a question mark after everything? They're like, hello, I'm from Australia. It's good to be here. It's like they're not confident in what they're saying. They have to end everything with a question mark. That's how you do the Australian accent. And number 8 or 9, Warrior, is 1776 is the answer to tyranny, saying, what up? What is going on, 1776? And everyone else says, hello, enjoy the sun. Thank you, Claire. And I knew something was up there. Probably we're talking about Candace Owens. All right, guys, let's get into breaking news.
Welcome to Shitty Breaking News with your host, James Carner, offering his shitty opinion.
So you're not going to believe this, but the United States seizes an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. Gee, why, if it's all about drugs, would they sanction an oil tanker off of the coast of Venezuela? You don't think it has to do with China and how they built Venezuela's infrastructure, right? And what's interesting is, let's not forget Maria Corina Machado, who won the Nobel Peace Prize. She, believe it or not, is the NATO-approved, Orsini-approved person that they want to control Venezuela, because those funds from the oil will go to America and not to China. So right now, Maduro is the Lee family's puppet, and he is the one that is trying to ship the oil from Venezuela to China because they owe them at least $60 billion in crude oil. And we're in the middle of it saying, no, that's going towards us. Now, here's why they cannot go to war. They'll put their battleships all around and make it look like it, but it's private companies that are purchasing the oil. It's not the country. And this keeps the country of China out of the view, because you can't blame China, but you can blame the companies inside China that's buying the oil. So that's how they get away with this. So all of the ships and Russian ships. Yeah, apparently there's 2 battleships Russian battleships parked off of Venezuela. And people are freaking out. Oh my God, it's World War III. No, it's posturing. It's peacocking. Okay, but the Bank for International Settlements, they have not said anything in their forecasts about World War III right now. So if they're not telling all the central bankers to hunker down, and this is where we get our oracle, our information from the Satanic Bank for International Settlements quarterly review. When they say hunker down, then we'll all hunker down. Then I'll tell you it's going to be World War III. But other than that, no, it ain't going to happen. It's just a bunch of posturing. And America's going to steal that oil, I promise you. Blend of unusual weather conditions brings trillions of gallons of persistent rain to Oregon. Yeah. That always happens when you cloud seed. And they're cloud seeding on purpose because they have got to get America down further so that our dollar can match the yuan so that they can merge them together into the CBDC. That's what the Bank for International Settlements told us they're planning on doing. So that's what they're doing. America has to die more, okay? We got to get rid of the middle class, all right? We have to get less rich. So that's what they're going to continue doing. And how do you get less rich? You destroy where they live. Then they got to move, and then obviously they're not going to have enough money from the insurance. They're not going to pay for much. So they're going to have to buy another house, be in debt even more. So that's how you do it. You play with the weather. You take away all of the monies that they've made over the years, and game on. Now, unless you understand all this, unless you're a Christian, unless you watch my show, you're never going to understand what's coming. Maria Corina Machado appears in Oslo after Nobel Peace Prize win. Apparently she sent her daughter, here, you do it. I don't want anybody to shoot me right now because the Lee family are ready to shoot her. Judge blocks Trump's National Guard deployment in LA with sharp rebuke. Well, that's funny. He already released them and they already approved it. And we all know what the National Guard for each state is for. Every blue state that works for China, they're not giving their tariff money to Trump. So he's sending the National Guard over there to basically manhandle the ports to get the tariff money that's owed to the federal government. That's really the whole point to National Guard. It has nothing to do with riots, violence, and Trump doesn't give a shit about the homeless. All he cares about is getting China out of America because, hey, that's their competition. And their competition is gaining ground. Ever since President George Bush Sr. decided one day he wants to bring China into the fold and help with the New World Order. That's what I understand. And Erica Kirk's message to people who celebrated her husband's death, Charlie Kirk. I still work for the Orsinis. I work for the Orsinis. Collect my tears and pour them. Well, I'll tell you what, Jesus isn't taking those tears at all. He's not collecting yours unless you come clean. Come out and say, you know what? They told me to do this, and that is shitty breaking news. When we come back, we're going to talk about Satan. Yeah. Why the devil and their worshipers use humiliation rituals to rule the world. Yep, you're going to learn all about it coming up next. Stick around.
Paying federal income tax is voluntary. So why has every person you know done it their entire lives? You were told it's the law, but the system was built on a lie hidden in plain sight, that you are required by law to pay. The truth is, 98% of Americans don't owe income tax by law. Federal income tax is for federal employees. For everyone else, it's voluntary. You agreed to pay when you signed your first tax return, and you've been renewing that contract every year since. Sounds too good to be true? You're asking, why doesn't everyone know this? Because almost everyone signed before they were old enough to understand it. It's time to unlearn the lie and break free from IRS jurisdictions, protect your assets, and keep more of what you earn legally. Visit unincorporatedisassociations.com now and become tax-free.
It's voluntary. But everyone's still scared that the IRS is going to get them. No, they only get the people who signed it. Wherever your signature is on, now you're in debt to them. When you sign for, so every year you sign, yeah, I'll pay you this much. You're screwed. So get out of it. Sign up. There's 22, 23, maybe 24 I don't want to say 23 because that's an esoteric number, but I think 22 to 23 states will allow you to do an unincorporated association. And we did it under, we did it through those guys and through unincorporated associations, through Kirk Carmichael, and they did it under the state of California. And this is set up for Elite Potion. And we are not responsible for all of the crap that we're dealing with, like spending money in Ukraine, which does nothing for the American people, doesn't help the homeless, or propping up Israel, giving them more money and weapons so that they can kill innocent women and children. Yeah, I'm not interested in that, but I am interested in setting the record straight for the American people and giving them another chance to gain their money back from the beast system. So why Satanists? Why are the devil and his horde, why do they use humiliation rituals to shove it in your face? And also, how does that help with the rule of the modern world? Well, we call it the theater of degradation. There's a moment in every fallen kingdom when its true religion finally steps into the light. It's never announced. It's never voted on. It's never written into law. It's just performed, not in temples of stone, not in public square, not even with incense, cloaked hoodies, fire, and a bunch of chants. No. But they do it with shame, not through holy rites, but through stripping of human dignity. They think it's funny. The ancient world understood this instinctively. We've talked about it many times about the Satanists and the Hermeticists and the Luciferians and the Baal and Moloch worshipers and why they are the way they are. Well, the ancient world understood this, and every empire, every cult, every tyrant that practiced the same liturgy elevate power by humiliating the powerless. They break their will on purpose. They bend their identity, and they make the image of God bow before something lesser. And once that bow is made or done, kind of like what Candace Owens is doing by marrying into an occult satanic family, well, once that's done, the chain is spiritual, not political. Now, humiliation is not merely an act of cruelty. They don't think so. It's an initiation into the club, like the Black Eye Club. It's a forced baptism into a different kind of kingdom, one that rules by fear, by exposure, by degradation. When a person is humiliated, their inner scaffolding collapses. The self begins to loosen. The voice begins to fracture. And in that moment, something else can step in. A handler, an ideology maybe, a system, even a spirit. You see, the fallen have always known this since the ancient of times. They have no ability to create loyalty, so they manufacture it through shame. They cannot build identity, so they dissolve it and rebuild the pieces into a tool. Now, humiliation is the technology of domination. And all across history, this ritual has appeared wherever darkness rises. In tribal ordeals where the community forces the accused to drink poison while the village watches, they did that. In medieval courts where prisoners were paraded through streets to break the soul before sentencing, like tar and feathering, they did that. In revolutionary movements where public confession became the altar of ideological purity, they did that. In boot camp, in basements, college, and backstage rooms where the initiate is told that degradation is the price of belonging, they do that. Well, the settings change, but the ritual does not. You strip their dignity, break the will, you replace the identity. But in our age, the ritual has evolved. It's no longer hidden. It's televised, recorded, monetized, and replayed over and over and over again. The humiliation of celebrities, the engineered breakdowns of public figures like Britney Spears, the ritual shaming of students, soldiers, pledges, activists, and influencers. All of it has become a theater. It's a demonstration of power and who's in control. It's also a reminder that in the world system, no one rises without first being broken in front of witnesses. Shame. And no one who has been broken remains free either, as their humiliation becomes their collar. Their shame becomes their leash. And this also happens in MK Ultra mind control. Yet beneath all of the psychological explanations, the sociological theories, the intelligence manuals, and the academic studies, which I have a lot of books on, there's a deeper truth. Humiliation is the sacrament of Satan's kingdom. It's the counterfeit of repentance. You know, if you cheated on your wife, don't do it again. The inversion of baptism, the mockery of resurrection, every humiliation ritual tells the same lie. You are nothing. You belong to us. Your identity is ours to dismantle and rebuild. And every time the world applauds another public degradation, it becomes a congregation participating in a ritual it does not even understand. Do you guys remember Motley Crue? Vince Neil? We got in an accident, killed his buddy. Do you really think that that's what really happened? Or could we say that that was a humiliation ritual? To humiliate him in order to prove to the public that he's part of the club. I would say that's what happens when you shout at the devil. And what rises from these ashes is not just a controlled individual. It's a controlled society. A people taught to cheer when dignity falls. A culture trained to mock the broken. A generation shaped to accept degradation as entertainment, as justice, as normal. The beast does not need to seize power by force when humanity willingly absorbs its liturgy through screens and stages. And the more frequent the ritual becomes, the more numb the world grows to its spiritual meaning. Well, tonight begins the unveiling of their system. The architecture of humiliation from ancient rites to modern institutions, from underground cults to corporate towers, from intelligence agencies to the Hollywood stages. This is the religion behind the power structure of our age. This is the worship no one admits, but everyone witnesses. And this is the counterfeit transformation, preparing the world for a kingdom of coercion, shame, and broken identity. And once the pattern is seen, it can never be unseen. Now, long before hazing rites, you guys know college hazing rites? Did you know that's satanic? Sorry. Long before hazing rites, intelligence agencies, political revolutions, or even Hollywood casting couches, Harvey Weinstein, there was a more ancient courtroom, a more ancient rebellion, a more ancient humiliation. The Garden of Eden was the first sanctuary of identity, where dignity was not earned but breathed into existence by God himself. Remember, God molded Adam with his own hands. First time he's ever created anything with his hands. Everything else he spoke into existence. And then he breathed his breath into Adam's nostrils. You remember that? Identity. The fall introduced something entirely foreign to creation. Shame. And believe me, if you read the book of Adam and the Cave of Treasures, you will read about how Adam and Eve felt shame for 1,000 years. The moment Adam and Eve fell, they hid. And it wasn't because they were showing their tatas. It was because the serpent had introduced a new vocabulary into the human soul, something they never even felt before: shame. It became the first psychic wound. Now you can see why they do it live in front of you. It's Satan's way of saying, look what I did to Adam and Eve. Well, we're doing this to Vince Neil or Britney Spears or any other actor who freaks out in front of people. A new vocabulary. Shame became the first psychic wound, and humiliation became the first fracture in the image of God. And Satan never forgot its power. No. He's going to use it over and over and over again because shame separates us from God. The fallen realm does not innovate, it exploits. From the beginning, the enemy understood that humiliation tears open the soul. It destabilizes the inner structure that was meant to host God's presence. Shame was not simply the consequence of sin. It became a gateway. It weakened the will. It clouded discernment and opened humanity to manipulation. Every dark kingdom built after Eden reflects that same strategy. Reduction of the person, inversion of identity, and the crushing of dignity as the initiation into bondage. Humiliation is not random cruelty. It's the technology of spiritual overthrow. That's right, Scorpion. They did it to Kanye West. How else is he going to be the god of this world unless they shame him, put him in a psych ward, tell everyone he's insane, and yet when he gets released, he makes billions? His shame ritual. Boot says, same thing happens in the post office if you tamper with the mail. The postal inspectors will perp walk you in handcuffs through the whole plant. Yeah, stay away from the post office if you have questions. Just go in there and just mail your package, pay the fine. Surfer Wife says, it may sound crazy, but since hubby and I, started reading the Ethiopian Bible, we are getting screwed over by others even more. Well, that's kind of why you're here. See, I'm not the one that says, I told you so. But I am the one that says, dude, the truth makes us free. You know, believe it or not, we're all of us, the 18 of you watching tonight, we are starting a revolution. Something that scares the living shit out of the federal government. Something that they can't retract. And that's truth. And that's why the show is called Cause Before Symptom. We get to the bottom of it. Ancient cultures preserved fragments of this pattern of shame. Tribal societies used public degradation as a form of spiritual testing, stripping the accused naked, forcing poison ordeals, or compelling public confession while elders pronounced curses over them. In these rituals, humiliation was the threshold between accusation and control, innocence and subjugation. Abyssinian traditions recorded by travelers speak of captured enemies paraded for mockery before judgment because humiliation was believed to weaken the spirit, making the captive easier to command. In fact, Freemasons, they'll put you in a coffin and have you convince your most, deepest, darkest secret, and then they'll pee on you. That's what they do. And Rome built its triumphs on this very principle. Before a conquered king was exalted or executed or even imprisoned, he was humiliated before the crowds. His identity was broken under the weight of spectacle. Now, behind these cultural expressions lies the deeper spiritual logic. This is important. Humiliation disrupts the alignment between the human soul and its divine origin. It tears at the imago Dei, or imago Dei, Latin for your ego. It fractures self-awareness, turning the inward gaze from God to self-loathing. And this fracture is the very doorway through which the enemy seeks to enter. Just as pride was the downfall of the angels, humiliation became their chosen tool for the downfall of humanity. Why do you always go to your Father when you pray and you say, "Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me"? You're going to him in shame. Does the Father want you to approach his throne as you're on your knees begging for mercy? No. He's like your earthly dad. I want you to do me a favor. If you approach your heavenly Father in shame, I want you to do the same thing to your earthly father. I want to see what your earthly father will do after a few weeks when you continue calling them about your masturbation problem. It's going to drive them nuts. Shame. The fallen could not restore their former glory, but they could drag the children of God into the same spiritual posture that they themselves occupy. Shame. Broken, shame, disoriented, disconnected from the Father. And over time, humiliation evolved into a formalized ritual. Rome picked it up. The Vatican picked it up. They built the Bible based on shame while they took all the goodness of God out of it. We learned that from the Ethiopian canon. Over time, humiliation evolved into a formalized ritual or a counterfeit death designed to prepare the victim for a new master. And every degradation ritual in antiquity mimics this pattern. In some African societies, the initiate was isolated, mocked, stripped, and forced into painful tasks before being welcomed as a man or a warrior or even a servant. So these were not cultural accidents. They were spiritual blueprints. They reenact the fracture of the Garden of Eden, training the mind to accept authority through shame. In essence, humiliation became a kind of dark initiation, a symbolic descent before induction into a hierarchy that thrives on crushed identity. This is why humiliation rituals are so persistent across time. They are older than empires and deeper than culture. They belong to the spiritual operating system of rebellion. The fallen realm discovered early that if a person could could be made to hate themselves, they could be reshaped into almost anything. So humiliation creates compliance. Humiliation creates dependence. Humiliation creates the conditions for possession, influence, and control. It's the ritual that prepares the soul for a counterfeit kingdom. So stop going to your Father in heaven or Jesus or the Holy Spirit when you pray in shame. He loves you. The Bible says if your earthly father gives you great gifts, how much better would your heavenly Father? Stop approaching him in shame. He's not interested in your sin. He doesn't even remember it. He's interested in a conversation with you to see how you're doing. And he probably every now and then would ask, would you reciprocate that? Meaning, Lord, how are you? And in the ancient pattern from Eden to Abyssinia, from tribal shame to imperial spectacle lies the real secret. Humiliation has never been about the act itself. It has always been about access. The moment dignity collapses, the door opens. The fallen have known this since the first deception, and every modern system that uses humiliation still walks in that blueprint. Humiliation is the first spiritual technology of the fallen. And modern systems are learning to weaponize it with scientific precision. As we get humiliated and doxxed online for saying something that is an opinion about politics. Because it works. Tribes, empires, and cults, they use it because it works. But the 20th century with its wars, revolutions, and expanding state power, well, they produced something brand new. The academic and clinical study of how humiliation reshapes the human mind. Joust A.M. Mirlu, in his seminal work, called The Rape of the Mind, did what no one before him had dared. He anatomized the ritual, studied it. He exposed humiliation not as a cultural quirk, but as the central mechanism of psychological conquest. What ancient shamans and tyrants practiced intuitively. Mirlo revealed in clinical terms, humiliation breaks the psychological spine. So humiliation does not merely wound pride. It destabilizes the inner architecture that makes choice possible. Mirlu explains that when a person is repeatedly shamed, contradicted, mocked, or publicly exposed, the mind begins to enter a state of metadicidal fatigue, where resistance becomes too costly to sustain, and shame shuts down cognitive clarity. Fear interrupts independent thought, confusion disrupts the continuity of self, and eventually the victim becomes malleable, open to suggestion, and desperate for relief. Even if that relief comes from the very system that is breaking them. So in this way, humiliation serves the same purpose psychologically that it served spiritually. It creates a vacuum where identity once stood. And this is why totalitarian regimes make humiliation public. Mao understood it. Stalin understood it. The architects of Soviet show trials understood it. The struggle session was not designed to extract truth. It was designed to erase the self. A dissident was dragged before neighbors, colleagues, and family, forced to confess crimes they didn't commit, to shout slogans they didn't believe in, and denounce values they once held dear. The confession was not the point, humiliation was. Because once a person publicly humiliates themselves under pressure, something irreversible happens inside of them. They become alienated from who they were. They split. The internal voice that once anchored identity is replaced by the voice of fear, and fear always bows to power. Mirlu warns that the psychic fracture is the goal of mind manipulation. Humiliation turns the mind inward with corrosive self-doubt. Victims begin to question their memories, their perceptions, their morality, even their sanity. And once shame forces a person into that internal collapse, the manipulator does not need to persuade them at all. They only need to provide a narrative that promises some relief. Humiliation breaks the inner compass. Indoctrination replaces it with a new one. The mechanism appears in communist indoctrination camps, extremist recruitment, domestic abuse cycles, and intelligence interrogation rooms. Anywhere humiliation is ritualized, identity is being rewritten. Why is it that after what? Hundreds of years of schooling, and we still have bullies? Humiliation. The psychology is always the same. The victim is isolated, contradicted, mocked, pressured, cornered, exposed, or ridiculed. Resistance is met with intensified degradation. Submission is rewarded with momentary relief. And over time, the mind associates obedience with safety and humiliation with inevitability. This cycle becomes a psychological cage. And like all cages, it eventually becomes internal. The victim polices themselves. And this is what humiliation is such an efficient tool of domination. Why people enjoy S&M. It externalizes control first, then internalizes it. Shame becomes the handler that never sleeps. A humiliated person carries their captor inside their own mind. Jeffrey Epstein knew about all of this, as he would do humiliation rituals on his victims all the time. They correct themselves before they speak. They preempt their own resistance. They walk with the expectation of punishment. Totalitarian regimes do not simply break bodies, they break wills. And humiliation is the hammer. And this is the shocking truth, the truth that Mirlu hinted at but did not fully articulate, is that humiliation does not merely weaken the mind, it actually prepares it. It creates the same psychological vulnerability that spiritual possession exploits. disassociation, fragmentation, dependency, and self-hatred. In the ancient world, humiliation opened a person to spiritual subjugation. And in the modern world, it opens them to ideological, institutional, or handler control. So the mechanism is identical, only the vocabulary has changed. Humiliation is the ritual that softens resistance. It's the solvent that dissolves identity. And it's the psychic scalpel that opens the human soul for intrusion. When governments, cults, intelligence agencies, activist movements, universities, or corporations use humiliation, they're just participating, knowingly or not even, or unbeknownst to them, in a ritual older than history, inadvertently. The ritual that began in the Garden of Eden is now weaponized by the fallen, and it's perfected by science. The ritual that prepares humanity not for freedom, but for a master. If totalitarian states refined humiliation into a political weapon, then American Greek life perfected it into a cultural tradition. Fraternities and sororities have become some of the most enduring institutions in the Western world, and not because of their academics, philanthropy, or networking. Their staying power comes from something far older, far darker, and far more effective: ritualized humiliation. Behind the smiling group photos and philanthropic branding lies a controlled laboratory where the mechanics of psychological domination are rehearsed year after year. Hazing is not an accident of youth culture. It is a carefully preserved initiation framework designed to dismantle identity and rebuild it in the image of the group. Modern hazing rituals, forced drinking, nudity, ridicule, servitude, branding, sleep deprivation, secrecy, and staged danger, they're not innovations. They're mirroring the ancient humiliation rites used by warrior tribes, occult orders, and imperial cults. And the goal is always the same: strip the initiate's ego, break their internal hierarchy, and then reinstall a new sense of self that is tied to the organization. In every major hazing text that I've uploaded, this pattern appears with chilling clarity. I found dozens and dozens of books on hazing. I had no idea they were out there. They were. They are contradicted, mocked, subordinated, and pressured to perform tasks that contradict their moral intuitions. And they learn quickly that the fastest path to relief is compliance. And this compliance becomes the seed of loyalty. And this is why they have secret societies. And this is what they do in secret societies in order to control towns, counties, states, countries, corporations, and on and on and on. One of the reasons hazing endures, despite decades of legal reform and public exposure, is that it really still works. It produces bonds that are not merely emotional, they are traumatic. And trauma bonding is one of the strongest adhesive forces in human psychology. When suffering is shared, especially in the presence of hierarchy, the survivor aligns more deeply with the group that controlled their pain. The pledges begin to feel pride in their humiliation, even nostalgia for the brutality that they endured. This inversion of meaning is a mark of all succession and successful domination systems. And what should have produced a rebellion instead of produces gratitude, shockingly. So what should have caused revulsion becomes the badge of honor. And this is not cultural curiosity. It is engineered psychological inversion. And what makes the Greek life especially potent is not that what it does to the individual, it is who these individuals later become. The fraternity and sorority system is one of the largest leadership pipelines in America. Senators, CEO, judges, military officers, media executives, intelligence personnel, they all often pass through these ritual chambers as young adults. And the hazing basement becomes a rehearsal room for future power, a place where obedience is normalized, hierarchy is sacralized, and humiliation is reframed as, it's just tradition. These future leaders learn early that degradation is part of belonging and that silence is part of advancement. And by the time they enter positions of authority, they no longer question the ritual, they replicate it. The most striking feature of hazing culture is its secrecy. Every humiliation ritual is wrapped in a code of silence, protected by threats of expulsion, ridicule, or social exile. This secrecy transforms the ritual from a mere social activity into a covenant. The initiate learns that their shame is now part of the sacred archive, a buried ledger of actions that they would never want publicly released. This becomes an early form of leverage, a precursor to the political and corporate blackmail systems that operate at a higher level than power. Fraternity life teaches young adults that personal embarrassment is the currency, that compliance is purchased through fear of exposure, and that humiliation binds groups together like mortar in a wall. And people say, we need America to change. Yeah, we sure do. We need to stop ritualizing these things. We need to stop humiliation rituals and indoctrinating our kids into a world where it's satanic. Yet beneath all of these psychological and sociological layers lies something even deeper. Greek life serves as one of the beast system's earliest initiation structures in modern world. It teaches the architecture of dominance long before participants understand what they're learning. It conditions them to accept authority without transparency, to obey commands without clarity, and to value group acceptance over personal conviction. It's a playground that trains its members to survive and later enforce systems of humiliation elsewhere. And what begins as a college tradition becomes a cultural operating system. And this is why hazing persists, not because universities fail to regulate it, not because students are reckless, but because humiliation rituals are too effective to abandon. They don't outlaw them. They produce leaders who will not question humiliation when they see it used in corporations, militaries, political campaigns, entertainment industries, or intelligence agencies. The ritual becomes the expectation. The expectation becomes the norm. The norm becomes the culture, and that's the cause before the symptom. Greek life is not the origin of the humiliation system. It's just one of the most efficient factories. It takes inexperienced minds and molds them into vessels that can tolerate, administer, and replicate the rites of domination. And what begins in the fraternity house prepares them for what awaits in the halls of power. And in this way, the ancient ritual survives, disguised as tradition, legitimized by academia, and perpetrated by those who once bowed before it. Now, if fraternities rehearse humiliation as a social rite, well, the military enshrines it as a science. Every army on earth, from antiquity to present, has understood something instinctive about human nature. A soldier cannot be formed until the civilian self has been dismantled. And the fastest, most reliable way to dismantle a self is through humiliation. Drill instructors know it. Training manuals acknowledge it between the lines. Generals rely on it, and even recruits who swear they will never break eventually remember the moment that they did and how the breaking changed them. The modern boot camp is not the accidental byproduct of military culture. It is the institutionalization of an ancient spiritual principle, obedience forged through degradation. Recruits are stripped of their names, their individuality, their clothing, their hair, their schedules, and their personal boundaries. They're shouted at, corrected publicly, punished collectively, and forced into synchronized motions that erase personal will. They march in formation not merely to learn coordination, but to replace the internal rhythm of the mind with the external rhythm of command. Well, this message is unmistakable. Your identity is no longer yours. You belong to us. This process is so normalized that few ever question the ritual logic behind it. It's satanic. But the materials that I have on military ethics and the debate around initial entry training expose what insiders have always known. Humiliation is not a side effect of training. It is the heart of it. The psychological literature behind modern military induction shows that the breakdown of ego is necessary for battlefield cohesion. A soldier who still thinks like an individual is a liability. A soldier who has been humiliated into unity, who fears letting the group down more than he fears death, becomes the ideal instrument of war. Humiliation in the military follows a predictable arc. The recruit enters with personal identity intact. The system attacks it with intensity, ridicule, contradiction, impossible standards, invasive inspection, loss of privacy, and a constant awareness of being watched. Well, this creates cognitive dissonance, the same mental pressure described by Mirlu in his book. Eventually, the recruit experiences a moment of internal collapse, the point where resistance no longer feels useful. Psychologists call it ego death. Militaries call it becoming a soldier. Well, in spiritual terms, it's the same fracture the fallen realm exploited in the Garden of Eden, the mind yielding under pressure to a new authority. But what makes military humiliation distinct from fraternity hazing is its sheer scale and purpose. Fraternities create loyalty to a social tribe. The military creates willingness to kill and die on command. And this requires a deeper breaking. The recruit must not only obey, but must obey when it violates his instinct for self-preservation. That level of obedience cannot be intellectual. It must be psychological. And humiliation is the only tool powerful enough to override the primal survival instinct. Once a recruit has learned to embrace degradation as part of the belonging, he can endure fear, pain, exhaustion, and even moral conflict. The ritual strips away not only pride, but hesitation. Yet the military's use of humiliation is not merely functional, it's symbolic. Public correction represents judgment. Forced conformity represents submission. Loss of control represents surrender. The chain of command becomes a secular priesthood, and the recruit becomes a vessel shaped by ritual. This is why militaries across cultures, Roman legions, Ottoman jacenaries, Spartan Ogaj, I don't know how you should pronounce that, Agaj, the Spartan army, and American Marines, they all develop nearly identical patterns despite never sharing doctrine. And they all inherited the same spiritual blueprint. They all discovered the power of humiliation to erase the old man and raise a new one for the purpose of the state. Those of you in the military who are listening to this are probably shocked because they didn't realize that they were being divided and split. And what's rarely admitted is that humiliation does not disappear once training ends. It becomes embedded. Every hierarchy in the armed forces continues the pattern. Seniors degrade juniors, juniors degrade the newly arrived, and the cycle reproduces itself endlessly. And this continuity is not culture inertia, it's psychological architecture. A humiliated recruit becomes an officer who expects humiliation to maintain discipline. A broken soldier becomes a sergeant who understands instinctively how to break others. And the ritual becomes self-perpetuating, a sacrament passed from generation to generation. And it's not just in the armies, it's also in gangs too. When they beat the crap out of someone to join a gang, humiliation. But the deepest truth, the one almost no one even speaks about, is that humiliation prepares the soldier for something beyond obedience. It prepares them for compartmentalization, the ability to do things they would never have done before the ritual broke them. And this is why intelligence agencies recruit from military pools. A person who has learned to separate the self from the role, to suppress emotion, to endure shame, to act under pressure, has already been conditioned for covert work. Boot camp is not the end of the humiliation system either. It is its gateway. And humiliation in the military is therefore not merely about discipline. It's about transformation. A new identity must be forged, one that can kill without hesitation, follow orders without clarity, and return home carrying memories too heavy for the uninitiated to understand. And the ritual makes this possible. It's the same one the fallen angels used at the dawn of rebellion, the deliberate dismantling of the self. Now, if the military uses humiliation to forge obedience in public, the intelligent world uses humiliation to forge loyalty in private. Yeah, The CIA, NBCB, ABCD, EFG, HIJK, all of the alphabet soup secret services. These intelligence agencies do not operate on physical force, open discipline, or visible hierarchy. Their authority is built on something far more intimate and far more dangerous: leverage. And nothing produces leverage more reliably, more permanently, and more invisibly than humiliation. And in the shadows where spies are made, handlers understand a truth older than espionage itself. A person's usefulness increases in direct proportion to the secrets that can destroy them. Documents from the CIA, histories of intelligence operations, and insider reflections all show that humiliation is not a training byproduct. It is an intentional architecture built into recruitment, assessment, compartmentalization, and operational dependence. Unlike the military, which breaks a person for the sake of unity, intelligence work breaks a person for the sake of secrecy. And the system must ensure that an operative never turns inward to their conscience or outward to anyone but the agency. Because to do this, the agency must become a sole guardian of the operative's shame. The only entity with full knowledge of their weaknesses, their compromises, their moral fractures, and their private humiliations. Every CIA officer has a handler. And humiliation begins subtly. They don't even know they're being controlled. Psychological assessments probe the recruit's vulnerabilities, desires, fears, and hidden failures. Background investigations turn personal history into a file of potential pressure points. Initiates enter into departments that expose recruits to situations that test their boundaries, ethics, and loyalty. Even seemingly benign rituals, yet through intense debriefs, aggressive interrogation simulations, forced contradictions, deliberate emotional isolation, all introduce the same disoriented forces described by Mirlou. The objective is not simply to evaluate the recruit. It is to learn how they break. And once the agency understands a recruit's breaking points, it can build a relationship of asymmetrical power. The operative is expected to keep secrets, but the agency already holds theirs. Some of these humiliations are discovered. Some are constructed, literally like through blackmail. And in the darker corners of intelligence history, some are engineered outright. And this is the realm where humiliation becomes a binding spell, a psychological contract written in shame. A soldier obeys because of conditioning. A spy obeys because defiance would expose them and what they did, not merely professionally, but existentially. But humiliation in intelligence works goes far even deeper than obedience. It produces compartmentalization. A person who carries private shame learns to divide themselves into parts. The self of the world sees, the self the agency knows, and the self that they no longer recognize. And this fractured identity is the very soil in which covert work works and grows. When an operative must lie, manipulate, infiltrate, seduce, and betray, they must silence the internal voice that once questioned such actions. Humiliation helps silence that voice, and the conscience becomes negotiable. The self becomes elastic. The handler becomes the new moral compass. They participated in a satanic ritual and had no idea. And this is why agencies prefer operatives with vulnerabilities. A person with no shame is unpredictable. A person with controlled shame is loyal. And a person with hidden shame, hidden because the agency orchestrated, witnessed, and archived it, is bound. So anytime you find yourself locked up with an agent, go after their personal life. Go after their shame. Find it. Exploit it. Because they're trying to do the same to you. And this is the chilling logic behind many of the darker training accounts and covert initiation rituals that appear in the books that I have. In some cases, operatives were placed in compromising situations. In others, they were told to commit actions that could never be admitted publicly. The humiliation becomes the chain. The agency becomes the only safe anchor and harbor. And what makes intelligence humiliations uniquely dangerous is its invisibility. Military humiliation is loud. It's in your face. Fraternity humiliation is televised. Communist humiliation is public. But intelligence humiliation, it's private, silent, and individualized, tailored to the psychology of the target. There are no crowds to witness it. It happens in rooms without windows, in conversations without transcripts, in simulations without witnesses. And because it's secret, it's permanent. A humiliation seen by millions may be forgotten in a decade, and a humiliation seen by one handler may control a soul for life. Spiritually, the intelligence world replicates the oldest pattern of the fallen realm: control through hidden compromise. Satan does not need to destroy a person publicly. He needs only to keep them controlled privately. And intelligence agencies have internalized this spiritual logic without ever acknowledging its origin. They understand that a person living in fear of their own exposure will become a weapon pointed where the master decides. And so humiliation becomes the invisibility ink of espionage, the signature that seals the soul to the system. And the most chilling realization is that the intelligence world does not merely use humiliation, it industrializes it. Files become confessional booths. Blackmail becomes sacrament. Shame becomes the leash that guides geopolitics. And the operatives, often entering a desire to serve their country, discover too late that they now serve something else, a hierarchy built on the spiritual architecture of degradation. If intelligence agencies refine humiliation for individuals like communist regimes weaponize it for entire nations. What begins as a ritual in the dim corners of fraternities and the sealed rooms of intelligence headquarters becomes, under totalitarian ideology, a public liturgy, meaning we all take part in it. A national sacrament of submission. And the communist re-education model, especially the Chinese and Soviet systems documented in the information that I have, demonstrates something unprecedented in human history: the transformation of humiliation into a mechanism for reshaping collective identity. And the goal is no longer to break one man for usefulness, but to break millions for compliance. Re-education camps, struggle sessions, public confessions, face loss punishments, and ideological self-criticism rituals all operate on the same psychological principle described by Mirlou. Identity fractures under humiliation, but in communist systems, humiliation is not incidental. It's codified. It's policy. It's an instrument of governance. And Human Rights Watch reports and academic analysis show that Chinese re-education incorporates forced confession, verbal degradation, sleep deprivation, and group denunciation as tools to dissolve a person's sense of moral and social reality. Still think you want to move to China? The ritual is unmistakable. The accused is placed before the collective, stripped of dignity, and commanded to condemn themselves. No wonder why they throw themselves out windows. Their humiliation is not a step towards justice. It is the mechanism by which the state rewrites the self. Still want to move to Russia? They perfected it. And what makes communist humiliation distinct is its performative nature. Soviet show trials and Maoist struggle sessions were not designed to persuade the accused. They were designed to indoctrinate the witnesses. The crowd becomes both the audience and the enforcer. The ritual reshapes the nation by teaching millions that identity is provisional, truth is malleable, and dignity is conditional upon loyalty to the state. The humiliation of one becomes a warning to all. The ritual spreads fear like incense through the air, permeating homes, schools, workplaces, and neighborhoods until everyone internalizes the same message: survival requires submission. Chinese educational reforms, documented in the uploads that I have, on de-Sovietation and ideological transformation, they all reveal how humiliation is woven into the foundations of learning itself. Students are taught from a young age to critique themselves publicly, confess ideological impurities, and demonstrate correct thought before their peers. This is humiliation disguised as pedagogy. The purpose is not knowledge, but conformity. The shame inflicted upon the student becomes the psychological anchor, tying their identity to the collective. And the classroom becomes the microcosm of the re-education camp, a place where innocence is replaced by fear and intuition is replaced by orthodoxy. This mass-scale humiliation has profound spiritual implications. When humiliation becomes national policy, it does more than break individuals. It erodes the moral spine of society itself. A humiliated population becomes easier to manipulate, easier to surveil, easier to steer towards the desires of the ruling class. And the people learn to self-police their speech, their thoughts, their relationships, and their facial expressions. Fear becomes the national language, and silence becomes wisdom. Compliance becomes survival. And the state becomes the arbiter of dignity, granting it and withdrawing it like an idol demanding worship. What communist regimes achieved, often unwittingly, is the secular replication of ancient demonic dominion. In the spiritual realm, humiliation prepares a soul for possession by breaking the inner defenses. No wonder we all have demons. In the political realm, humiliation prepares a population for ideological occupation. The mechanisms are identical: confusion, shame, isolation, forced confession, group pressure, and the dissolution of personal identity. Well, communist re-education is simply the industrial scale version of the spiritual humiliation ritual the fallen perfected long before Marx ever wrote a word. Still want to move to China? Still want to move to Russia? You still want a socialist nation? You still want the government to give you things? They're doing it because they want you to break. The terrifying truth is that the mass humiliation rituals does not end when the ritual stops. Its effects actually linger generationally. Children raised by humiliated parents inherit the silence, the caution, the fear of exposure. The nation becomes intergenerationally conditioned to accept degradation as normal. Even after reforms, the psychological residue remains. The system may loosen, but the people remain trained. Trained to bow, trained to conceal, trained to obey. Communism does not merely control bodies, it colonizes conscience. Now, if communism used humiliation to break nations, Hollywood uses humiliation to bind individuals to a throne of illusion. Political systems degrade the masses for control. The entertainment system degrades the chosen few for access. Why else do people want gossip about the celebrities? It's a mass humiliation ritual. People are falling for it, buying their own split personality. The secrecy of intelligence work and the spectacle of totalitarianism converge in the entertainment industry, where humiliation is engineered, aestheticized, recorded, and weaponized, all while being mistaken for glamour. Hollywood has always understood what ancient temples and modern handlers understood. Humiliation destroys personal sovereignty. A person who has surrendered their dignity is far easier to mold, manage, and monetize. In one of my books, Confessions of a Fashion Model, a CIA Hollywood interactive monarch program CIA spy named David Heaveners, while he reveals a world where humiliation is not simply tolerated but designed into the very structure of the industry. Casting couches, enforced nudity, degrading auditions, blackmail tests, ritual hazing during early career phases and public humiliation disguised as initiations all operate on the same principle. Break them before you brand them. Why do they need to show their breasts on movies? We don't need to see them. But they do to humiliate the actress. The entertainment elite have perfected a specific kind of humiliation ritual, one that is both public and private. In private, the initiate is pressured into acts that they would never have considered under normal circumstances. And these moments are often photographed, filmed, and witnessed by individuals positioned as gatekeepers. When actors do a love scene, they're surrounded by an entire crew of people while they're trying to act like they're having sex. The humiliation becomes the leash. In public, the celebrity is paraded through roles, interviews, and stunts that diminish their dignity for the sake of virality or edge. Both dimensions serve the same purpose, ensure that the star cannot separate their identity from the system that owns them. Modeling agencies, according to Nathalie Agostina's confessions, they operate almost identically to political grooming networks. Young hopefuls are isolated, judged endlessly on appearance. pressured into compromising situations, and constantly reminded that their value is conditional on pleasing gatekeepers. This is humiliation as currency, a spiritual and psychological toll exacted before fame is granted. And in these environments, the degradation is not an accident of exploitation. It's the mechanism that filters out anyone who retains too strong of a sense of self. Only the broken can be controlled. Only the silenced can be trusted to keep the secrets behind the camera. And then comes the public ritual, the red carpets, late night shows, comedic roasts, tabloid scandals, leaked photos, wardrobe malfunctions, and engineered breakdowns all serve as modern versions of the ancient spectacle, the humiliation of a chosen figure before a watching crowd. The public witnesses the breaking without understanding the ritual that they are participating in. And what looks like entertainment is actually indoctrination. The masses learn to laugh at degradation. They learn to normalize the destruction of dignity. And they learn that the price of power is submission to this system. And that humiliation is proof of belonging. And what makes Hollywood humiliation rituals uniquely insidious is their spiritual dimension. The industry, as the information that I have on occult texts and insider documents, it's deeply intertwined with esoteric symbolism, ritual pageantry, and hidden networks of influence. Many humiliations are staged not simply for leverage, but for initiation. And the fallen realm has always required the same offering, dignity laid out at the feet of the idol. Whether the idol is a false god in antiquity or a studio executive in modernity, the spiritual transaction is unchanged. The person who bows becomes bound. And this is why so many celebrities experience fragmentation, addiction, psychological collapse, or sudden personality shifts. Humiliation fractures identity. Fame magnifies the fracture. And the handlers, managers, producers, studios, publicists, they step into the cracks to assert control. The celebrity becomes a product, a puppet, an avatar, shaped by the ritual that broke them. Their public image hides a private captivity so profound that even their own family cannot understand it. And Hollywood's humiliation machine also functions as a signaling system. When a rising star is humiliated, mocked by an interviewer, forced into a compromising scene, ridiculed on stage, or subjected to a sudden leak, the insiders understand that the ritual has begun. And once the celebrity accepts the humiliation without protest, well, the system knows that they can be trusted. If they resist, they're discarded, blacklisted, or destroyed publicly to warn others. This is the same spiritual logic of ancient sacrifice. One person's humiliation becomes the offering that sustains the temple. You're living in satanic America, folks. And the end goal is always the same: control. Control the narrative. Control the influence. Control the person's public voice and private obedience. Humiliation achieves what money cannot buy and what contracts cannot guarantee: the reshaping of a human soul into an asset. And when the humiliation operated in tribal societies, it broke an individual, believe me. When totalitarian regimes perfected it, it broke a whole population. But in the digital age, humiliation has evolved into something far more pervasive, efficient, and destructive. A decentralized enforcement system where the public becomes both the executioner and the prisoner. Cancel culture, online witch hunts, and social media mobs are not random explosions of outrage. They are a new form of engineered humiliation that conditions entire societies to police themselves under the threat of exposure and ruin. The mechanics are unmistakable. The crowd identifies a target, often arbitrarily, and demands confession. The ritual begins with accusation, escalates with outrage, peaks with public apology, and ends with exile. Each phase mirrors the same humiliation cycle used in communist struggle sessions: identity, isolate, identify, degrade, confess, punish. And just those earlier systems, the goal is not just for accountability. The goal is conformity through fear. Anyone witnessing the humiliation learns the lesson instantly. Deviation from the dominant ideology carries a social death sentence. So when you have a show, just like me, and they're attacking you left from right, don't buy into their satanic humiliation ritual. Tell them to fuck off. If people don't like you, tough shit. Social media has transformed humiliation into an algorithmic force multiplier. Platforms reward outrage with visibility. They amplify shaming with engagement and immortalize degradation through permanent archives. The digital mob operates with near total impunity, striking with a swiftness and severity that no centralized government could ever replicate. The power once held by kings, priests, and dictators is now wielded by anonymous users, bots, influencer tribunals, DARPA, and corporate PR departments. A single misstep, real or invented, can destroy reputation, employment, relationships, and mental stability within hours. This is humiliation as spectacle. But unlike Hollywood's rituals, the participants are not celebrities. They are ordinary people. The humiliation is not staged for fame. It's inflicted for discipline. And cancel culture does not create stars. It creates silence. It trains the population to censor themselves preemptively, to avoid topics that are forbidden, to hide beliefs that contradict the prevailing narrative, and to live in constant fear of being singled out for humiliation. The very anticipation of shame becomes a leash around the neck of the entire culture. Corporations have adopted quickly, weaponizing humiliation to enforce ideological compliance. Diversity seminars require public confession of unconscious biases. HR departments pressure employees to admit wrongdoing framed through politicized language. Professional organizations issue statements demanding that members publicly align with certain positions or face reputational consequences. These rituals echo the same psychological techniques that appeared in communist re-education systems and university hazing traditions: coerced confessions, self-denunciation, and the relinquishing of personal conviction for the sake of the collective. Politicians and media systems also harness humiliation as policy. Opponents are not debated, they're shamed. Voters are not persuaded, they're mocked. Citizens are not educated, they are intimidated. As humiliation becomes a weapon of narrative warfare, used to delegitimize dissent, dehumanize adversaries, and condition the public to accept one worldview as the only socially acceptable option. The result is a culture where people no longer fear being wrong, they fear being humiliated. But beneath the socio-political layers, the spiritual architecture remains the same. Humiliation fractures identity. It forces individuals to disassociate from their convictions. It creates a psychological state of fear, confusion, and obedience. This is the very environment the fallen realms thrive on. A society of individuals cut off from their inner confidence, moral clarity, and divine identity. The collective shaming system mirrors the oldest tactic of spiritual warfare. Use humiliation to sever a person from their God-given sense of worth, then fill the vacuum with counterfeit belonging. So cancel culture functions as a global initiation rite into a secular religion, one where confession is mandatory, forgiveness is conditional, and redemption is impossible. And once a person is humiliated, the stain never leaves. The ritual does not restore, it erases. And this is the clearest sign that the spirit behind the system is not liberation, but domination. So God uses conviction to transform, but the beast system uses humiliation to control. And in the digital arena, every person becomes both potential victim and potential enforcer. The ritual spreads laterally, infecting friends, groups, workplaces, churches, schools, and families, and it teaches society to communicate in fear and hide in plain sight. And just like every humiliation system before it, the end goal is not the destruction of one person, it is the conditioning of all people. At the top of the global hierarchy, humiliation is no longer even punishment, spectacle, or ideological enforcement, as it becomes something far more ancient, far more ceremonial, and far more chilling. It's a rite of passage into the inner circles of power. The public sees humiliation as scandal. The elites see it as initiation. It is the unspoken requirement for entry into the highest ranks of finance, politics, occult fraternities, intelligence oversights, and dynamic power. To the untrained eye, the scandals of the powerful appear random. But to those who understand the architecture, these humiliations are neither accidental nor destructive. They are proof of ownership. Every dynasty that survives long enough to eventually institute its own humiliation ritual. The Breakspears, Medicis, Orsini, and European black nobility, they all used degradation rites to bind loyalty to ensure succession. Modern financial dynasties, from Rothschild branches to the major Anglo-American banking clans, they adopted similar internal mechanisms. Across these families and institutions, the pattern is constant. The heir must be broken before they are crowned. They must surrender dignity to the throne that they will inherit. And in ancient culture orders, this rite symbolized death and rebirth. In elite networks, it symbolizes control. And this is where the humiliation ritual evolves into the purest form. Lower systems use humiliation to produce audience and obedience. Elite systems use humiliation to erase autonomy. It is the ritual by which power themselves are chained. And the higher the position, the deeper the humiliation is required. And unlike the public shaming of cancel culture or the hazing of fraternities, this humiliation is entirely hidden, witnessed only by the initiates and preserved in the archives of those who rule them. A man who carries a secret humiliation known to only the brotherhood, the covenant, the council, or the order becomes controllable for life. His loyalty is no longer ideological or financial, it is existential. Especially on Hollywood's interplay, monarch methodologies, occult fraternities, and the machinery of mind control, they all reveal the elites do not simply endure humiliation, they are inducted through it. Their handlers ensure that each initiate participates in the act that, if revealed, would destroy their public persona, marriage, career, influence, or sanity. Photographs, recordings, testimonies, or insider witnesses all become the silent chain linking the initiate to the hierarchy above them. This is the same blueprint intelligence agencies use to bind operatives, except at the elite level, the stakes are global. And this is why so many political figures, media barons, and billionaires carry scars of scandal that never quite reached the surface, as their humiliations were never intended for the public. They were intended for the archives. And these archives, whether controlled by intelligence networks, occult institutions, or dynastic families, they function as a true treasury of power. Money can be overcome. Votes can be manipulated. Public perception can be rehabilitated. But humiliation buried in the vault of the elite become a lifelong tether. So humiliation also marks the shift from participant to priest. In elite circles, once the initiate has been humiliated and broken, they are invited to participate in the humiliation of others. This completes the ritual cycle. The formerly powerless becomes the enforcer. Rinse, lather, repeat. And they learn that their authority depends on sustaining the system that broke them. And this is why major political dynasties insist that every generation undergo its own version of a ritual. It's not merely tradition, it's spiritual succession. And the humiliation becomes the crown. And the spiritual backdrop is unmistakable. Satanic structures have always inverted God's pattern. Where God exalts the humble, the fallen exalt the humiliated. Where God purifies through grace, the fallen purify through degradation. Where God anoints through righteousness, the fallen anoint through shame. The elite humiliation rite is a counterfeit coronation, a dark baptism that marks a person as property of the hierarchy. It is the ritual by which the beast system identifies its own shepherds. So in this way, in circles of extreme power, humiliation often crosses into ritualized abuse, occult ceremony, and sacrificial imagery. And these acts are not simply depravity, they are oaths. They ensure no initiate can ever return to innocence, whistleblow, or serve another master. And the humiliation becomes a spiritual brand, the mark not worn on the foreheads or hand, but etched into the conscience. And because the ritual is secret, the public never sees the true hierarchy of power. They see elections, appointments, corporate succession, celebrity ascensions, and philanthropic umbrellas and media narratives, but they never see the basement rooms, the closed-door ceremonies, the intimate degradations, and the silent witnesses that determine who rises and who is discarded. Behind every throne in the modern world sits an archive of humiliations, the true infrastructure of global control. And what began in the Garden of Eden as the first wound has become, at the highest levels of power, the foundational sacrament of the counterfeit kingdom. For the elites, humiliation is not a threat. It's covenant. And by the time we reach the age of global surveillance, digital mobs, engineered scandal, re-education programs, covert operations, elite initiation rites, and entertainment industry degradation, it becomes clear that humiliation is no longer scattered across institutions. It is systemic. It's coordinated, and it's converging. And what began as a spiritual weapon in the Garden of Eden has matured into a worldwide architecture, a ritual ecosystem preparing humanity for a master it does not yet fully see. The beast system cannot rule free people. It cannot govern confident souls. It cannot manipulate minds anchored in identity, dignity, and divine origin. For the Antichrist to rise, the world must be conditioned to accept authority through fear, conformity through shame, and belonging through degradation. Well, humiliation does all three. It creates a society comfortable with kneeling before power, even when that power is corrupt. It trains hearts to accept punishment for dissent. It molds entire populations into vessels that crave approval from the very structures that abuse them. So in this sense, humiliation becomes the liturgy of the beast. The ritual teaches humanity the gestures of worship long before the idol arrives. Public shaming teaches them to bow. Cancel culture teaches them to confess to charges that they did not commit. And re-education teaches them to renounce convictions that they once held dear. An intelligence system teaches them to fear exposure more than they fear evil. And corporate conformity teaches them that silence is safety. And entertainment humiliation teaches them that dignity is disposable. And elite humiliation teaches future rulers that power requires spiritual compromise. So every layer of society learns the same lesson, but in its own language. You will belong to us, or we will break you. And this is why humiliation rituals increase in frequency and intensity as the world moves towards the final consolidation of power. The beast system must fracture identity at every level: psychological, social, political, spiritual. A person who knows they are in God cannot be owned. A person stripped of dignity can be commanded. A humiliation ritual does not merely weaken the individual, it rewires their soul's posture. It replaces uprightness with submission, courage with silence, discernment with fear, and it transforms people from image bearers into dependents. Well, humiliation always destroys the possibility of genuine repentance. True repentance restores a person's dignity by bringing them back into right standing with God. Satanic humiliation replaces repentance with permanent guilt. That's a state where the person can never be clean, never be forgiven, never be whole. This prepares the world for a Savior who is not Jesus. Because when dignity is shattered and conscience confused, the Antichrist will offer a counterfeit redemption. Here you go, try this. Not forgiveness, but belonging. Not transformation, but compliance. Not truth, but security. When the layers are peeled back from ancient shame and Eden to tribal rites, to military barracks, to intelligence basements, to communist plazas, to Hollywood studios, to the boardrooms of global dynasties, a single truth emerges, an unmistakable force. Humiliation is not random. It is not cultural. It is not political. It is spiritual. It's the chosen weapon of a kingdom that cannot create, cannot redeem, cannot love, and therefore must break what it cannot own. Every humiliation ritual that the world performs is a distorted echo of the first rupture in the Garden of Eden. The moment when humanity hid from the presence of God because shame told them they were no longer worthy to stand upright. And Satan's been using that ever since on you. What Satan uses to fracture, God uses to heal. What the fallen weaponized to enslave, Christ broke by enduring on our behalf. The world system of humiliation is designed to collapse identity, to fragment conscience, and prepare the soul for domination. Yet the cross reveals the inversion. Jesus submitted not to humiliation as bondage, but as warfare. He took on shame so that shame would lose its power. He let the world strip him of dignity so that his resurrection could restore ours. Well, the beast system humiliates us to break, but Jesus was humiliated for free and to free us. And this is the great unspoken secret behind every humiliation ritual. It only works on those who do not know who they are. And this is why the beast system must humiliate before it can rule, because it cannot conquer the upright. It cannot possess the confident. It cannot deceive those who see through the ritual. But the remnant does not kneel to shame. They kneel to Jesus. And the moment a person kneels to Jesus, the power of humiliation crashes. A person who has already confessed their sin to God cannot be manipulated by public accusation. A person who has already surrendered their pride at the foot of the cross cannot be dominated by human shame. And a person who has been forgiven fully cannot be controlled by the threat of exposure. This is why Scripture says the righteous are as bold as a lion, because their identity is not fragile. Their dignity is not conditional. Their allegiance is just simply not for sale. So let the world do their stupid rituals. Whatever. The beast system's going to tighten its grip. Fine. They have to do it through control. Pussies. And the elites will enforce their initiation oaths. Fine. The culture will grow more hostile to anyone who refuses to bow. But the remnant will stand, not because they've escaped humiliation, but because they have been redeemed from its power. And when humiliation can no longer break a person, the world's greatest weapon becomes toothless. In the end, humiliation is the currency of a dying kingdom. Dignity is the language of a kingdom that is coming. A world trained to kneel before shame will one day kneel before the Antichrist. But a remnant trained to kneel before Jesus will one day stand with him in glory. This is the dividing line. This is the revelation beneath the ritual. This is why humiliation is the beast's sacrament, and why it will fail to conquer the ones sealed by God.
Why do 75% of people feel exhausted all the time? The answer might surprise you. In the 1920s, Standard Oil decided to dive into medicine. They pushed synthetic petroleum into our drugs. Sure, it masked symptoms, but it wrecked our guts. Our good bacteria, which fight off parasites and heavy metals, got wiped out by crude oil. But here's the good news. We can fix this by going back to nature. Introducing Elite Potion, the world's top detox program. It restores your good bacteria by removing toxic threats like aluminum, strontium, barium, and parasites. Imagine feeling energized and alive again. They said there couldn't be a pill that did it all. We invented it. Visit elitepotion.com and reclaim your health from synthetic pharmaceuticals. Your body will thank you.
This has been Cause Before Symptom with your host, James Carner. Go to his website, jamescarner.com, and sign up for his newsletter. Also, download his free books on the breath war, the crown of blood, and the ritual machine. Fix your body by buying his award-winning detox formula, removing heavy metals and parasites. You'll feel better and live longer. Go to elitepotion.com. And one more thing, please. Just try and love your neighbor, because if you do, the world would be a better place. See you tomorrow.